Woodsman. Not long ago, about half a year ago, Marinka's job involved frequent business trips to the neighboring district. 3 times a week she drove 120 kilometers at the wheel of her car to the small district center, held a meeting at the factory, checked compliance with standards, controlled the technological process. Then she got back in the car, drove 120 kilometers, and she was home. She left in the morning at 7 and returned around 8 in the evening. The work paid well, especially for such a remote province, and was the envy of Marinka's friends. Almost immediately outside the city the connection to civilization disappeared. The internet was dying and cellular service sometimes broke through, but it took more than 60 kilometers to get a steady signal. Along the road was a dense swampy forest. Rare blue signs sometimes say that the nearest village to the right or left on the potholes 8 to 10 kilometers. The road is almost empty. Occasionally we see trucks or lumber trucks barely making it up the hill, less often cars whiz by. There was only one speed camera at the exit from the city. Further on the speed was regulated by unexpected potholes in the asphalt. Usually Marinka turned on some audiobook, and had a great time driving around familiar obstacles. The whole trip was calculated by the minute. 8 minutes camera, 6 minutes traffic lights and goodbye internet, 28 minutes to the old rusty propaganda stand calling for love the nature, but the paint is darkened and flecked, so Marinka counted 28 minutes to the object Lupri, then straight ahead. Around a sharp turn to the left ended dense swamp forest, and began almost transparent pine forest. Red trunks were buried in white moss. Already she could see the tin houses of bus stops, and the internet was alive again. She liked the job, the car, the road, the audiobook, and even that old, rusty sign from the forestry office. That day, for the first time, she felt something was wrong. Just around the corner, some vague uneasiness and longing suddenly overwhelmed her. Tears choked her desperately. Marinka did not understand what happened and wrote it off to nervousness because of the morning scandal with her husband, who demanded from her almost a detailed report, as long as there is a telephone connection, where she is at the moment, and it would be even better if she had moved to another job. She was angry that her husband, that obnoxious chump, thought that she, a grown-up, independent woman, a strict and demanding boss, needed to tell him where she was going, as if some kind of dependent and weak-willed, as if she gave reason to doubt her ability to drive. Well, an unpleasant conversation with her subordinates was forthcoming. Marriage, said Marinka angrily. In 15 minutes the anxiety passed. On her next trips Marinka passed this place without even noticing it. But once the uneasy feeling returned and she again experienced the same incomprehensible anxiety and fear, literally just turned the corner, although this time the visit was an ordinary visit, and she was not troubled. Again the same despair, fear, and foreboding of imminent disaster. This time, however, the feeling of an extraneous presence was added. It was as if someone evil was staring at the back of her head with a hateful look. Almost unconsciously, she glanced around, searching for the one whose gaze she felt on the deserted road. As she drove a little ahead, she thought she saw a faintly discernible man standing in the pines behind her in the woods. The anxiety passed and the radio came on, the DJ talking. The radio. It just came on. That is, the internet just came back on. But it usually comes back on a lot earlier, just around the corner. Since then, she's had another added distraction. Driving past this mysterious place, Marinka waited to see how she would feel. Would she just pass it or not? It did not matter which way she drove, to the factory or home, there was a sense of distress, and the presence of something or someone evil, full of hatred, and lately more and more often. This strange phenomenon was always accompanied by silence. It was thick and threatening. It made my ears prick up. Every time at that time Marinka saw a tall man in the forest, not far from the road. At first she did not know if someone was standing there, or if she was just imagining it, but over and over he stood closer and closer to the road. Here, she could already make out that he was dressed in green, protective clothing and, for some reason, in a military tent coat. He just stood there looking at the road. To herself, Marinka called him Lesnik. Passing the next turn and feeling the usual uneasiness, she slowly turned her head to where she usually watched the mysterious man. The forester was standing fairly close to the road, but still his face was hidden under the hood of his cape. Suddenly, he raised his hand and pointed directly at Marinka's car. Out of surprise, she held her gaze longer and drove into the oncoming lane, where a lorry was flying desperately, honking and trying to brake. It was November and the road was covered with a slushy mixture of muddy wet snow and sand. By some miracle, they separated. Since then, Marinka has met Lesnik twice more. In late November, there was a heavy snowfall at night, the road was blocked and only part of it had been cleared. Seeing the familiar cape, she once again felt a rush of alarm and imminent disaster. He was standing so close that she could see his red swollen face, the expression of glee, and a wandering malevolent smile. He was rubbing his hands together as if with anticipation of what he was up to. The log, which had apparently fallen out of the lumber truck the day before, lay covered with snow, blocking the road on the right side. Marinka managed to slow down and drove around the obstacle. A man in the rearview mirror shouted something angrily in her wake and waved his hands threateningly. A month later, at the end of December, she congratulated the workers on New Year holidays, thanked them for their excellent work, stayed late at the company, and went home late, but in a great mood. The client was pleased with the work, concluded a contract for the next year, and the holidays and the weekend ahead. Marinka climbed into the rumbling, comfortably warmed-up space of the car, turned on the high beam, inserted a flash drive and turned on the music loud and loud. In the headlights the snow flew into the windshield like a multitude of sharp long needles. Windshield wipers could barely manage to sweep away the flakes. She noticed it late. In the middle of this snow blizzard, blinded by the light of Marinka's headlights, the forester was doing some crazy, terrible dance on the deserted road in his fluttering cloak. She was terrified, she hit the brakes and lost control. The car skidded and spun on the slippery road. Marinka desperately remembered everything she could do when she skidded, turning the steering wheel back and forth. The music shouted something about beekeepers, the snow stuck to the window, she screamed, swore and prayed at the same time. And a madman in a raincoat stood on the curb, laughing and clapping his hands. How long this psychedelic waltz went on, she did not know. When it was over, her car just calmly stopped along the curb on the black bare asphalt, as if that blizzard and the terrible dance had never happened. It stopped just in the place where Marinka had first noticed the strange man. The phone vibrated silently on a nearby chair. As if in oblivion, Marinka picked up the phone and held it to her ear. Her husband excitedly asked where she was, saying that he and his son were waiting for her to have dinner. It was so warm and cozy and safe there at home. Marinka said she loved them and would come soon. And then, when the conversation was over, she burst into tears. It was her last day of work at that company. Right after the holidays, she wrote her resignation letter. Then she cautiously asked former co-workers who lived in that backwater little town what kind of lunatic could be standing in the road. Many said that accidents often happened in that place, and that a man in a military cape was sometimes seen next to the road. But who he was, no one knew.